audience members join in, they can definitely take part in the conversation. But I wanted to thank everyone for joining us tonight to discuss this cycle's NICU fellowship application. We are the Future Neos Now National Interest Group, basically catering to all your neonatology needs. My name is Farhida Pavandi. I'm a PGY2, soon to be PGY3, applying NICU this year, currently a resident at Cohen Children's Medical Center. And I will also have our remaining facilitators for the night also introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Anjana. I'm also one of the moderators tonight. It's nice to meet you. I'm one of the members of the Future Neos Now Exec Council, and I'm a current PGY1, rising PGY2 at Inova Children's Hospital. We're excited to have you all here tonight, and we can't wait to get this session started.
And I'm Amisha. I'm the current chair of Future Neos Now, PGY3, and will be starting fellowship in a month at OHSU in Portland. I will be moderating the chat, and if anyone has any questions that they want to direct message, feel free to message any of us those questions, and we will pose them at the end of some of the questions that we have gathered, or you can use the chat throughout the session as well.
Great. So as Misha touched upon, tonight we're going to first start off with a general timeline of what the application cycle is going to look like. We're going to then take it to our 5 panelists for the night, talking about some pre-planned questions that we think would be most beneficial for the audience. Then we'll launch into the live Q&A, where we're going to cover the questions that you guys are posting in the chat or messaging us privately. And then we'll finish off with a closing. I'm the chair-elect of the Future Neos Now, very excited to take over the committee. And we'll also touch base at the end with any extra information regarding the Executive Council applications for next year. If any of you are interested in joining us, we would, of course, love to have you apply and get your input on the committee. So let's get right into it. So let's talk about the timeline for this year. June 5th, the EFDO started distributing tokens to fellowship applicants. July 7th is when applicants can start submitting their applications to programs at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. And then July 16th, so around mid-July, programs can begin reviewing applications at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. That's a very important deadline to keep in the back of your mind, July 16th. August 27th, that's when match opens. October 1st, ranking opens. And then another very important deadline is November 19th, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. That's when your rank order list certification deadline is. And last but not least, December 3rd is the big awaited day. 12 p.m. Eastern Time is match day. So let's get right into introducing our lovely panelists for the night. First up is Dr. Emily Carter. She is the program director at OHSU. She went to medical school at OHSU as well as did her fellowship there, and she did her residency at Stanford University. Her areas of academic interest and focus are medical education, professional development, and neonatal epidemiology. Dr. Carter fell in love with neonatology for the complex inpatient medicine balanced by the intense long-term relationships she develops with families. These relationships remain grounding for her in the harder moments of the NICU. And a fun tidbit about her life outside of medicine is that Portland has the best restaurant scene, including food carts. She loves trying new places. This week she had brunch at a place called Fairweather in Portland that she highly recommends. Welcome, Dr. Carter. We also have Dr. Erin Bergner. She is the Associate Program Director at Oklahoma Children's Hospital. She went to medical school at the University of Oklahoma, and she did her residency and fellowship at Baylor College of Medicine, Texas Children's Hospital. Her areas of academic interest and focus are nutrition, human milk, professional development, and program administration. Dr. Bergner chose neonatology because she's always thought embryology and the intricate physiology of early life were fascinating. Plus, she simply loves babies and finds that it's a privilege to care for them through critical moments and then watch them grow and thrive. The NICU blends high acuity medicine with meaningful long-term connections with families and with an incredible interdisciplinary team. And a fun tidbit about her is she's a loyal OKC Thunder fan. Thunder up. Welcome, Dr. Bergner. And we also have Dr. Brittany Schwartz. She's the PD at Johns Hopkins Medicine. She went to medical school at Creighton University School of Medicine and did her residency and fellowship at Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital, Case Western Reserve University. Her areas of academic interest and focus are medical education and faculty development. Dr. Schwartz chose neonatology because she found joy in both the bread and butter of the NICU and the more complex or rare diagnoses. The field offers a unique combination of high acuity critical care and the privilege of building lasting relationships with families during a deeply meaningful time in their lives. A fun tidbit about her life is that she's married with a 6-year-old daughter. She plays in a women's ice hockey league and is a proud member of the Bills Mafia, although she has never broken a folding table. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Schwartz.
All right, I'll be introducing our next two wonderful panelists. First up, we have Dr. Anamika Banerjee. She is the PD at Loma Linda Children's Hospital. She went to medical school at Vanderbilt University of Medicine, and she also went there for residency and fellowship. Her areas of academic interest and focus are in medical education and tiny baby care. And she chose neonatology because it chose her. She loved every aspect of it. The ICU physiology was incredible for her and ever changing. Being at bedside and watching for patterns, sharing sad and happy experiences with grateful families at all walks of life, and being in a place with a rich repository of QI research, med ed, advocacy, admin, offered her a great potential for strong work-life balance. And a little fun tidbit about her life outside of medicine. She has two beautiful kids, age 15 and 12. She also has a dog and 3 birds, and she calls her house a zoo. And last but not least, we have Dr. Ashley Luck. She is a program director at UT Austin Dell Children's Hospital. She went to medical school at Florida State University College of Medicine in Tallahassee. She went to residency at University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center in Dallas. And she did 2 fellowships, one at Baylor College of Medicine in NICU, and the other one was at George Washington University in neonatal neurology. Her areas of academic interest and focus are in neonatal neurology, medical education, and advocacy, both federal and state. And she chose neonatology because she loves the broad range of activities throughout the day, like putting out procedures, deliveries, prenatal consults, putting out fires overnight, research, education, QI, etc. And she loves the ability to take care of critically ill infants while also having continuity and meaningful long-term relationships with families as they stay for months at a time. And a fun little tidbit about her life outside of medicine, she loves wake surfing and gardening. So, with that, we will get into our questions for the night. And we'd love to hear from our panelists about these. So, our first question is, what is something that is unique about your program? And this question's open to all the panelists.
I can go first to at the University of Oklahoma, I think one of the unique things about us is that we really focus on individualized professional development. We have the luxury of being a medium-sized fellowship program that's in a pretty large, diverse faculty. So it really allows opportunity for our fellows to get all the resources they need and have people really know them and focus on them. And so it allows us to be really committed to developing excellent neonatologists, but also really leaders in the field too.
Emily and I are both unmuting at the same time. One of the really cool parts that I've gotten to experience at UT Austin has been that we actually created our fellowship program in 2022. So it's a relatively new program, and we're graduating our first class which has been exciting because everything has been extremely fellow centric in the sense that anything we've built has been heavily based on feedback and input from the fellows. So there's nothing at our program that is just that way because that's how it's always been done. But it was really fun to be part of an intentional design that every single thing has been built kind of with the way of medicine and the way that people want to learn within the past couple of years. And that's been really exciting and fun.
I think one of the unique things about practicing and training in the Pacific Northwest is it's a really small community of neonatologists. So there's a couple dozen of us in the state of Oregon, and we meet regularly. And actually, as I was leaving the office, I'm on service today. Some of our private practice alumni were meeting with our current fellows to talk to them about what life is like in a totally different system than they're used to seeing on a day-to-day basis. And that also is important because our fellows run our telemedicine program, which is very unique. And so they interact with both those neonatologists and the pediatricians in the community on a regular basis, helping them run codes for babies with a robot. And so they learn this unique skill that doesn't happen in many parts of the country, and also develop close relationships before they even go out into the community that they're likely going to practice in.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go, Anna.
So we're in sunny Southern California, and we're blessed with a lot of neonatology programs within a close area. One of the cool parts about our program is that we host a quarterly Joint Fellows Conference where all the programs in Southern California get together and sort of get a chance to network, to meet each other, to meet keynote speakers all throughout the field of neonatology, nationally and internationally. And so it kind of is a great way not only to meet your future colleagues, but also to do some job networking because we're all very closely connected with the PD world down here. Our location, we're in San Bernardino, the Loma Linda area, is sort of awesome just because we're just a couple hours away from a lot of things like the beaches, great hikes, theme parks, that sort of thing. So if you have a day off or a weekend off, it allows for a lot of different opportunities to kind of do things that let you restore yourself. And then the last thing is we have probably like 1,000,000-mile referral area just because of our very unique area in San Bernardino and the Inland Empire. So we see it all in terms of patient population, so much so that we are in the midst of creating kind of tracks in neonatology, which will serve as, everybody who finishes our fellowship program will have a major in neonatology, so to speak, but they'll have a minor in something else. And whether it's POCUS or hemodynamics or medical education, it's going to allow for the ability to put some intentional time, effort, and resources into building something that can then launch your faculty career.
So at Johns Hopkins, I actually I polled a few of our fellows today to ask them what, they thought was something unique that I should share with you all. And many of them mentioned our neuroscience intensive care nursery program. So we call it NICIN. And there's no physical bed space in the unit, but rather it's a collaboration between neonatology, neurology, neurodevelopment, palliative care, and radiology. And we come together weekly for a conference where we're all in the same room. Starts with education on a topic related to neonatal neurology. Sometimes it's a radiologist leading the education. Sometimes it's one of our developmental specialists. Sometimes it's even our physical therapist. So you're really getting a multidisciplinary education in that respect. And it then goes into discussing all the patient cases. So any baby with a neurologic concern. So you're reading EEGs with the peds neurology team, you're reviewing all of the MRIs and head imaging directly with the radiologists. And then, with having palliative care there, we certainly always focus on, they help to guide us in making sure that we're all on the same page as far as the disease management and the prognosis, so that we have a shared a shared message for the family. And so there's a lot of communication skills and that palliative perspective that also comes out of the conference. So a blending of the minds, and it's something that the fellows really enjoy.
Thank you all for talking about your very unique programs. That was really interesting to hear. We'll move on to our next question. So, in this year's application, there are 3 gold tier and 5 silver tier signals. What tips do you have for residents on how they should use their 5 silver tier signals? And what advice do you have for folks from a different state or geographic region who are signaling your program? And for this question, we'll start with Dr. Bergner, who, our apologies, she's actually the PD of her program. We said APD before, but I just wanted to correct that. We'd love to hear about what you have to say, Dr. Bergner.
Absolutely. It's only one letter off, so it's easy. I was an APD at one point, so to so signals. I think the first thing is that it's new to neonatology in general. So I think it's going to be a learning curve for us all. The way I think of signals is really, particularly those silver signals, is your opportunity to connect with the program that meets your goals and matches your goals. So whereas a goal might be somewhere where you really have very close ties to, and it's very, very high on your list. Silver ones, I wouldn't call them like for reach schools or programs or anything. I would call it for programs that you might not have a known tie to, but you have a great interest in, or you see something, so like we actually have a great hemodynamics program at Oklahoma. A lot of people don't know that, but so if you're interested in hemodynamics and you can connect that to your application, and that's a way to signal to us, even if you're not from this part of the country, hey, I have a connection to your program, and I genuinely am interested in you. So I think that's really what I see as the intent of them. And then I think the important thing to make sure that it matches the rest of your application. So if you're signaling some school that's outside of a geographic region that you've said that your preference is and stuff, you have to make that connection. Why? Because all of us do holistic reviews on applications, and so those 2 programs will pick up that your signal may not match what you're saying the rest of the way. So try to make it match the rest of your application. Curious to see what other people have, since it's new for us all.
Yeah, I would say I had similar thoughts, as in, this is your first time doing this. This is our first time doing this. But I think the general chatter is similar to what Erin said, that it should be places that you have a genuine interest. And I think that it's also important to talk to faculty at your institution about how competitive are you for the individual schools, because of, avoid using your signals at schools that you may not be as competitive at, and really focus on optimizing your chances and of programs where you really see yourself ending up. And although this is all about the getting into fellowship, and that's the goal, I don't know if everybody would agree with this, but I think that these silvers could also be used if there's somewhere where you could see yourself ending up after fellowship, that it might not be the best fit for fellowship, but you want to build connections, get a sense of the program. If it's somewhere where you could see yourself in the long run, even if it's not right now, it's an opportunity for you to get to know them, for them to get to know you. And I say this as someone who I interviewed for fellowship at Johns Hopkins, and at the time it was not the best fit for me. However, 3 years later it was, and here I am. So, you don't have to get too caught up on only, a year out from now. And I think also, the last thing I'll add before passing it on is, many of us used to get emails from people outside of ERAS saying, oh, I'm interested in your program for this reason or that reason. And I would say that, this signaling should really make that not needed. And really it has to do with that disconnect and making things consistent that Erin was talking about. So, if you have already signaled a program, there's no need to send that other email. If you have not signaled a program and you go on to email them and expressing your interest, then there's going to be this question of, okay, why didn't you signal us then? Are you just trying to get like more pseudo signals? Unless there's a circumstance where, life events changed your trajectory, suddenly, significant others or spouses' jobs that changed or things that to explain that. But don't stress yourself out about having to send those emails outside of that. You don't have to play that game.
Totally agree with Dr. Bergner and Dr. Schwartz. Boy, this makes it hard because they've kind of taken all the best points. I think the only other thing I would add, which is just adding on to what they've already said, is just being very, very genuine and honest and reflective about what your goals are, both now and for your future. I think in the end, as program directors who love this job and kind of see us as, this is the best job in the world because we get to share with you why we love this job and then share that story with all of you who are going to join our community and, be the future of this profession. But in the end, we want everyone to be happy, and being happy means you will be more successful. So we're all looking for the right fit. And so if you do kind of a lot of due diligence and ask the people that know you best, your families, your colleagues, your mentors, what jives with me? Where might I be happy? And for different people, that equation looks a little bit different. Some of it is geographically oriented. Some of it is based on family. Some of it is based on your specific career goals. And then those things change with life as well. So I love that concept of just being consistent in your application, being super genuine and honest, and kind of trusting in the system a little bit, because we're all in it for the same reasons, and it's to support you and your future success.
Thank you for those amazing answers. That definitely gave us a lot of insight into what we can do for this new aspect of the application. Moving on to the next question.
Actually had a
What do
quick
you look
question
for?
if I could.
Oh,
Hey,
sorry?
would I be able to ask a quick question to follow that up?
Yeah, definitely.
My name is Vince Gouge. I'm a pediatric chief resident at University of Kentucky, applying this fall. How do you all anticipate viewing applicants that don't signal you, knowing then that your program is outside potentially of their top 8, at least by their estimation of whether they feel they're competitive? Maybe they have true interest, but like Dr. Schwartz mentioned, they didn't waste or choose to use theirs because they felt it wasn't their best chance of matching. How do you all anticipate viewing those programs or viewing those individuals that don't signal you?
I think as program directors, we know that typically the number one priority for applicants is location. And so if you have signaled a geographic preference that makes sense and you're applying, but it's not one of your, top 8 because of the signaling, I haven't been through it yet, but I anticipate looking more closely at those that have ties to the area. Hopefully you would also be interested, and you should be signaling some of those programs anyways, but unless there is a connection in the application based on a particular interest. So like for us with our neuroscience focus, if somebody does neonatal neurology, or somebody's interested in a palliative care fellowship after NICU because we have one of those, I might say, okay, they may not have signaled us, they may not know these aspects of our program or nuances of our program, However, based on their interests, I think we would be a good fit for them, and I might be able to sell us to them. Those are probably the people that I would, look to next after the signaling.
I would agree with that too. I think again, it's just a piece of the application. It's just an added piece of information. And like there's many programs like me in Oklahoma City. I think a lot of people don't think of Oklahoma City in the middle of the country and stuff too. And a very common reaction for us is, "Oh my gosh, you guys have so many things." Once they interview, so I know that about my program. And so I know that those are your first impressions and what you know and what people do. So I think it's just an added piece of information, but it's not the end all be all in terms of application selection.
Perfect. I don't want to take too much time. Thank you all so much for answering.
All right, moving on to our next question. What do you look for in an applicant? And I know that this is kind of a broad question, but we'll start with Dr. Carter for this.
It is a broad question and hard. I mean, it's hard to look at a paper application. We spend hours and hours in our division reading all of your applications, deciding who to interview, and then going back to them before we actually have the interview and having that 30 minutes with you as an individual. But I think in our program, we think about ourselves as I mentioned, we staff, our trainee staff, a lot of the NICUs in the area who will be our future colleagues. So we're looking for people that we want to work with. And I think all programs that is true, whether it's for a few years or truly for the rest of our careers. And so when you think of that, we're looking for people who are like to work collaboratively and are also leaders, because that's so much a part of what we do in neonatology is being a team leader in a collaborative way. And that becomes a huge part of your role as a fellow as well, navigating all these different relationships that you have to both create and manage in the unit, from the respiratory therapists to the dietitians to the nurses and the AP team, and then your attendings. And then I think the other piece that gets focused on a lot in the application is the things that you're passionate about. And I know that's really hard sometimes as a resident about what's going to drive you to be a neonatologist and in your career looking 5-10 years down the way. But I think thinking about the things that have brought you the most joy in the work that you do, and we understand that you love neonatology, so not the clinical piece, but what are the other parts of your life of your like professional life that you find interesting and are curious about, and the follow through with those that you've had over your career. So those are a couple of the things that we try to look for in that application, which can be quite challenging. So painting that picture through all the pieces of your application becomes really important.
All right. Just wanted to see if Dr. Luck had anything to say about this. Um, so passing the torch on to her.
Yeah, thanks. And I agree wholeheartedly with everything that Emily said. I think, like what everyone else on this panel has touched on, we also do a holistic review where we're blinded to certain aspects of the application and really try and get a sense of what each of your individual experiences has been that's gotten you to this point. I think to give a couple specific things, I personally really am impressed when an applicant's experiences have depth and long-term commitment over a bunch of half-day clinics, for example. So if you did something that's not even relevant to neonatology, Maybe you did something related to firearm injury or organ donation, whatever those passions that have been. When people have stayed committed to a certain area and then move through the process of that organization and sometimes even have some type of a leadership role later on, maybe you're part of the med student clinic and then you become a coordinator and then you organize something. That shows a lot about follow through and commitment and responsibility, and that you really worked to improve and change whatever that was, by your involvement with it, wanting to make something better just by the fact that you really cared deeply about it. And as Emily mentioned, I know that's really hard because you don't know what your lifelong specific passion is going to be, perhaps. We commonly get the applicant who just says, I'm really open to anything for research. I don't know yet exactly what organ system or what disease exactly I want to spend my time studying for a scholarly project, and that's totally okay. But what we want to see is that there is this commitment and devotion and ability to work through a process and then contribute meaningfully to that organization or that project or whatever it is that got you that passionate involvement. I also really love on a personal statement when the applicant tells me why they know that neonatology is the right fit for them above the level of just telling me what neonatology is. I know what neonatology is, so don't waste a paragraph and a half telling me about how neonatologists go to deliveries or they get to take care of preemies. Like, I know that because I do that. So I really love it. And it's very impactful when an applicant will write something like next level above that about what it is about the field that they know will bring them fulfillment. Yes, you went to the delivery of the 24-weeker and the bells were ringing. I think everyone will agree that that's like at least 50% of personal statements start with some comments about the delivery bells went off and I went in the room and it was the preemie or neck or whatever, which are all important. But how did that experience change you as a person? Or what did that bring about you, about your desire to be a neonatologist, and what it is that bothered you or that you thought was important for you to contribute to? So I really feel like those are the applications that stand out. And it doesn't have to be, like I said, at all related to neonatology. It's just what is passionate for your past experiences or what's relevant to your family. Some of the best applications, talked about like scenarios from their childhood and how that shaped them as a person, for example. So just I tell the residents when I do their personal statement workshop here at Dell, dig really deep and really be vulnerable in your personal statement, because those leave a lasting impact. And sometimes the personal statement might be the thing that sets you out, that then even though your application might be pretty typical resident in terms of your experiences, or maybe you don't have a bunch of research, sometimes bringing out that deeply introspective aspect can really help you kind of rise above and stand out. Or the personal statement is just like you're checking a box and it doesn't necessarily hurt anything if you've got other strengths. So you're each an individual and you know which aspect of that spectrum you might lean towards. Oh, I kind of answered the next question. Sorry.
No, not at all. It's actually a perfect segue into our next question. Thanks so much for those tidbits, Dr. Lack. So, how do you make a personal statement stand out in a good way? I'm going to pass it on to Dr. Banerjee to start.
Boy, Dr. Lucky sets the stage for me so beautifully. I'm so grateful. And I actually really appreciated that she spent time talking about it because, as a PD, we do this holistic review. I think my favorite part of the term personal statement is that it's personal. And so it really, really lets you tell your story in a way that different other parts of the application that are there and need to be there can't. And it's really your way to speak directly from your heart. I do think medicine in general is flooded with imposter syndrome. So one of my favorite parts about how annoying and difficult writing that personal statement is that hopefully it gives you the opportunity to talk to your cheerleaders and really let them remind you of what makes you amazing. Why, what are some of the things you've experienced in residency that are kind of like the theme of your journey towards your future? And if you can reflect on that and put that in words, that's one of the most ideal personal statements that we receive and the most impactful ones. And it can make the big difference between, hey, everybody's got their algorithm for screening applicants, and boy, a very strong personal statement can really, really impact our program's kind of approach to, wow, this person has this incredible story and has a lot to offer. I'll offer one more piece of advice for those of you thinking about AI or ChatGPT. Be very careful about how you choose to use it. Again, the personal statement is personal. I'm not going to speak for everyone. I'm sure I'm not going to say there's no role for it, but the general story is not something that any AI program can come up because it's your story. So you might use it to kind of check your spelling, maybe your grammar, but for the most part, the story itself should be yours. One suggestion, the people that you trust, ask them to read it and see if it sounds like you. Avoid vague comments. I think everyone's looking for a script. And specifically for this personal statement, please avoid a script to the best extent possible. The other thing I would really offer, and this is very much, in the hands of the beholder, definitely share what parts of the field bring you joy. But I think what also reaches me is what things you plan or hope to bring to the field. And the reason I share that is that every one of us has to figure out, what are we doing today? What are we doing tomorrow? Why do we stay in this job? And I got to tell you, every one of the amazing program directors on this panel, and not from a few days ago, not to mention those that are planning this amazing group, ask themselves that question: what do I bring to the table? And it can be a really powerful means of inspiration, sustainability, resilience, and kind of a way to say, I'm a long-term player in this game because of the things I have to offer.
Thank you so much, Dr. Banerjee. I think really the takeaway is to dig deep, come up with a personal story, and to make sure that you really have your character reflected in what you put out there. Dr. Schwartz, I'm going to pass it along to you.
Yeah, thank you. Similar. It's nice to know that we're all on very similar pages here. And I certainly recall and probably started my personal statement with a anecdote of, a patient that made me interested in neonatology. Although I will say what made it even more interesting is when I graduated fellowship, the last patient I took care of was a younger sibling of the patient that made me want to go into neonatology. So now it's interesting, but back then it was not actually interesting. So free yourself of having to, describe a patient case that, led you to be interested from the clinical side, unless there's something that next level that Dr. Luck was talking about as far as, what is the reflective piece, or what did you take away from it? What did you learn about yourself or about something else? I think in general, I recognize that not everyone is going to have a dramatic or a traumatic story or a struggle that they're going to talk through. And so what those stories allow for, and I think everyone should be able to do, is demonstrating self-reflection. And how well do you know yourself? How much are you willing to look inside? Because that has to do with, how easily you're going to be, adaptable and receptive to feedback, and, just showing that insight and maturity. And I think that can be done through a variety of ways. And then really also the maturity of knowing that you've thought about your career. So it doesn't have to be a specific interest or a specific topic, but do you know yourself well enough to know what you need to be successful? And so I really enjoy applications that they may tell a story and it's like, oh, this is how I learned this about myself. And because of that, I know that I would do best in, this environment, or I'm really seeking this type of mentorship because, XYZ. And, that really helps me as a program director not only get to know the applicant a little bit, but it also it's to your advantage, because if you are telling program directors that I need X, Y, and Z, and they only have A, B, C, well, then you'd be wasting your time, interviewing with them. And so I think that I appreciate when applicants know themselves enough and share with me kind of what they are looking for, so that I can be self-reflective and honest about, am I able to meet their needs, and how can we best support them?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. I think this was really helpful to be able to, I think as a trainee, it's really clear how important it is for fellowship applications to have a strong understanding of what your own goals are and why you want to do NICU, and to make sure that's conveyed. So appreciate that very much. Let's move on to our next question. What advice do you have for what experiences should ideally be included in the application, as well as what experiences are selected as meaningful? I'm going to pass it to Dr. Carter first.
This is so individualized. I think my advice for this would be to have somebody who, either your faculty mentor that you hopefully have in residency, or if you have a NICU fellowship, the program director there, or someone that reads applications frequently, to look at your entire application. I always sit down with our applicants who are applying around this time of the year and look over it's hard to select a few things that are meaningful of all the things that you've been doing, but to try to paint a picture that also supports your personal statement. So maybe I'll take a little bit different approach to this question, which is like, how do you approach that meeting? And I think having a first draft of your personal statement, your CV, and what you have thought about as your most meaningful activities that you've done during usually residency and medical school. But honestly, I think that there are some times that something from personally, I think that there are some times that something like that went through college and medical school, or is a little that really cemented your role as a physician or as a neonatologist, would work in that space. But focusing on those more recent activities is probably the best thing to do in for your meaningful activities. And then talking through that in words with the person who knows you to help use those activities to tell a story, because I think that's why it has been so helpful in the applications, first of all, to really give that space for you to describe why this particular activity is something that we should be paying attention to, and why you personally consider it meaningful to your development as a neonatologist, as a pediatrician, and as a person who wants to join our group. And so I think that is where you get the narrative piece that everybody's been talking about, because when we are sorting through applications, having your voice come through in those paper applications makes a huge difference. And each opportunity that you have, which these meaningful experiences are one of those, to paint that picture, to create your voice, makes a huge difference in your application. So I just think that it's important to not do this last minute, but consider this a part of your personal statement, an extended part of your personal statement that you review with somebody who reads these a lot.
Thanks so much, Dr. Carter. I think that's gives us a lot of perspective on how to think about the most meaningful experiences. And I like that as an extension of our personal statement. That's very helpful. Thank you. I'm going to pass it along to Dr. Bergner next. Anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I did want to again highlight what Dr. Carter just said, because I think she hit the nail on the head. It is your opportunity to convey your story. to really bring that all into a cohesive section. And so really the reflection behind and the why. So even research is a common one that people put in there, but why was that research experience important to you? Was it your first exposure to the scientific method or exploration? Was it frustrating to you in a certain way? Was it your first, exposure to neonatal physiology thing? Just why did that experience actually, why was that impactful to developing your professional identity and your road to becoming a neonatologist? Some things to add for things that maybe people might not think about as meaningful experiences, but definitely are, and are things that I certainly look for as a program director for things like service. Really speak loudly to me. I strongly look for a lean in personality, and someone that's going to contribute. And it doesn't have to be what you would traditionally think of community service. We all know that you've been residents and you work in, and you probably don't have a bunch of time to go volunteer at a soup kitchen, but you do service. You probably do tons of service to your program all the time. Like, are you on committees that are longitudinal and you've really developed something? Did you lean into some sort of rotation that needed help with the guidelines, or lean into something to improve the communication on your night rotation with the nurses, so something that really showed that you committed to something and you leaned in. You saw something that you wanted to improve and you leaned in. So it's a different way of thinking of service. It's not conventional, but it really shines in your application for sure. And then things like teaching and mentoring, I think, are maybe not always thought of by applicants too. Neonatology is it's our job to dispel complex information and develop relationships with people in intense circumstances, whether it be families or the staff that we work with in the NICU as well. So something that you can show that you leaned in and taught and did that, and you can highlight that that's a skill of yours and something that you really cultivated and developed, is something that shines as an area that would be a skill that we're looking for in a neonatologist. We can teach you how to do procedures. We can teach you how to do research. We can teach you all the physiology, but we can't teach you how to be a lean-in communicator that really works in a team-based system well. So if you can show that, people know that you're ready.
Thank you so much, Dr. Berdner. I think that was great insight, the importance of service, and to really reflect on what services we have done in residency and beyond. And I'm going to pass it along to Dr. Luck to finish us off with this question.
Thanks. I'm sitting here going, what do I add to all of these amazing things that I agree with wholeheartedly? I'll be short. I think one thing that is very helpful for me is there's a lot of organizations that exist in residencies that I'm not familiar with. So spelling out acronyms or helping me understand what the mission is, for example, of something. Some things are very obvious, like you are the social media chair for your residency program. Great, I know what that is. But I really appreciate it when an applicant explains what the meaning of the organization is, with brevity, and then talks about sometimes why they chose to get involved with that, what was the why, or gives me a little bit more detail about what their specific role in that activity was. So for example, if it's a research project, what was the question? And maybe I took care of a sick infant with this diagnosis, which spurred me to seek this research project. My role was in writing the IRB. I helped with data collection. I was the second author and presented this at a regional meeting. It helps me to understand what was the role, because when that's easier for me to try and just read from your experiences, I can quickly get a sense of how much involvement you had, versus sometimes I'll try and match that to then, okay, what are your presentations, and were you the first author or the fourth author, and what was your role? So it's really great, given the number of applications that programs receive, the faster you can help the program leadership who are reviewing the application understand your background in your experiences, the better it is and the less chances that it gets lost. Especially like if you have a gap year and you put that as an experience, that's very helpful because we look at, when did you graduate med school and residency, and are there gap years, and then do they explain what they did? So I really appreciate that, either if it's explained in the personal statement or if you actually put the gap year into your experiences and talk about what exactly were you doing, and what, led you to choose to do that. So just one specific little piece, because I know we've got other things to talk about, and the other feedback and answer to this question was excellent.
Thank you so much, Dr. Luck. So that gives us a wrap on our pre-planned questions for the evening, and we're going to now move on to the live Q&A. So if you do have any extra questions, you're welcome to put them in the chat, and we'll start with the questions we've gotten privately through the chat.
All right. So our first question is from Jack Wang. He wanted to know, do all NICU programs, or have all NICU programs agreed that they will be accepting signals, or will there be some programs that will and some that won't?
That's a great question. So the way that my understanding of, but based on what has been disseminated to us as well, is that the specialty as a whole, is enrolled in it, and so that's the default. But individual programs can choose to opt out. What I don't have clarity on, and I'm curious if any of the other panelists do, I don't know how it's going to look in ERAS. My guess is that, you won't be able to signal a program that's not accepting signals, but I'm not sure how that will be differentiated.
From what I remember from our program director meetings, is that the advice given to programs was if they were going to opt out, is to be transparent about that, at least on their website. Again, I don't know if you're us, how that signals either, but to if they're not going to use signals to let people know, so people know not to send them a signal on that.
I anticipate there will be great variability in how we on the program side utilize the signals. I wouldn't be surprised if there are some program directors who have found a tried and true way that they go through applications and decide who to interview, who may just continue to do it the same way. I think there's a lot of program directors who have been in this role for less than 5 years, and so very fresh and constantly trying to evolve the process at their program and kind of keep up with the times, if you will, with signals coming in. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how people utilize it across on the program leadership side. So to answer your question, yes, I think the specialty as a whole has adopted it, but what will be very unique to each program is how do they utilize it in terms of deciding who to interview, and then how will they rank and all of that. And there's some recommendations from the Organization of Neonatal Training Program Directors to all of the program leadership. But as always, with the number of programs there are, it will be unique to each program director.
All right, I have another question from the chat. Someone asked, because of my schedule, I'm not going to get any level 4 NICU exposure before submitting my fellowship application. How big of a deal is this?
I can speak for myself and say not a big deal at all. I think for every single program director right now, our goal is just to find the best fit. We obviously don't want anyone to feel like they're unhappy in the setting. There is a wide variety of NICUs at various different levels of experience. I think most of us try really hard to kind of assume you're coming in with minimal experience and really work hard to design a fellows college, an orientation, a shadow process us to support you and make sure that you don't feel overwhelmed to the extent that we can control an ICU environment, when you're starting with us. That said, let's say you're not super excited or happy about a level 4 NICU. That might be part of the equation for yourself. But I'm happy to hear what my co-panelists have to say about this.
I'd agree. I don't think it's at all the end of the world to, I think, again, fellowship is 3 years for a reason, and there's many skills to be taught during it. So if you can convey your interest and those baseline skills that are needed to develop working in a high acuity environment, and those are those teamwork skills, those communication skills, then I think people can look past that for sure. I think you can do other things within your application to strengthen the environments you have been in that are similar to that. So like PICU experience, or if you have a crazy, very busy floor service or a very busy ER service that requires you to have some of those skills, you can use your application to kind of show that in there, that you or even talk to your letter writers and have them show some of that for you and so I think that there's ways that you can craft that you've functioned well in an environment that would translate to a level 4 NICU.
Yeah, I think what I was going to hit on the, using your letter writers, because it really comes down to if you haven't been in those higher acuity settings, and someone may make the false assumption that your level 3 isn't, as busy. But if you have a letter writer that can speak to how you handle stress and busy environments and acuity, and the time of, the using your time efficiently and transitioning between tasks, and, those skills, they don't have to have been demonstrated in the NICU. And just because somebody rotated in a level 4 NICU also doesn't mean that they have those skills. So being strategic on your letter writers is another way that you can demonstrate that.
Thank you for those amazing answers. We have a few more questions in the chat. I know that it is almost the end of the session, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. If there is anyone who needs to leave, feel free to leave. And if any of our lovely panelists have a couple more minutes to stay back and answer questions, that would be great. So moving on to the next question, do your programs offer any upcoming info sessions or virtual tours before interview season?
I don't know if any of you participated in the APPD informational session we have in years past, and it just didn't work out timing wise this year, but most people use that time as an opportunity for residents who are kind of exploring different NICUs that or different programs that they might be interested in, but just don't know, to visit those programs. That already happened. So if you happen to not be in your application year, that would be a really good thing to look for next year. For us, we don't have necessarily something set up like that ahead of the application season, but maybe somebody else does.
We don't necessarily either. I do know that some institutions have like open houses and things too. Those typically there's the APPD listserv, which all program directors are on, typically advertises that. So that's something, if you're interested in something, you might talk to your program director, your residency program director, and just ask them to forward any information around neonatology ones that they see. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a super common thing. I think a lot of people, like Dr. Carter said, use the recruitment fair there, but there are some opportunities out there too.
Yeah, I think most of those open houses though are like after interview season, before like rank lists are due. I don't know of I don't know that I've seen any that happen prior to like applications going in that could be used to help decide, where to apply, if that's what you're specifically looking for. But that's where it helps to talk to, neonatology faculty where you are coming from, because they can point you, they've had more time to network and know what else is out there and what, can point you in the direction of certain programs.
Thank you for answering that. And thank you to all program leadership who dropped their contact info in the chat. Really appreciate that. One more question that we got was, is medical school a consideration in choosing applicants for interviews?
I can speak to our program. The only way that where you did medical school negatively impacts an application for our site is if it is an international medical school that is not formally recognized by DelMed. So that, I don't know if the other PDs have experienced this, but we've had, unfortunately, some incredible applicants from medical schools abroad where their medical school is not recognized by the GME office, just related to UT Austin and the Dell Medical School. So in that sense, there have been few times, I think I can count on on one hand for sure over the course of 4 application cycles, where I wanted to offer an interview to someone, but I couldn't because of their medical school's acceptance, credentialing wise. But other than that, there's not any type of filtering or something like that. I have heard of this in the old days before holistic reviews were a thing of, we're going to filter the top 50 medical schools or something in the country. I'm proud to say our program does nothing like that because I really don't think that that's how you get the best people. But I'm happy to see what other people, your perspectives for the rest of the panelists.
It was also something we got rid of in our holistic review. You didn't have that old, guard to get rid of in a new program, but it was something that we also did away with in our move to holistic review.
Yeah, it's not something that we look at for choosing applicants. Sometimes I'll look at it just looking for the location piece, like if it ties into your connection to a location or area. But as far as the school itself, I would say it is, if you've proven yourself during residency, then you're likely a different person than you were 3 years ago, and it's more of a checkbox.
All right, thank you so much for that answer. We have one last question for this session. How many research products, such as posters, presentations, publications, do you need to be considered competitive?
I don't think that for us at least, there's not an actual number there. I think what I'm looking for is a commitment to something, so like the fact that you had, because everyone has different opportunities depending on where they are, and so just the fact that you committed to a project, you did some, had a meaningful experience through it, you learned something through it, and so it could be one project that you kind of worked on throughout. It could be, some other project that had some meaningful connections, or but I don't a lot of the number goes into the amount of opportunities you have, and it's not necessarily a reflection of the applicant's work ethic around there. What reflects your work ethic is how much you leaned into that experience.
I think that narrative piece, or explaining why it was meaningful or what you got out of it, is much more impactful than any objective number.
All right. I think that's all for the night. So I'm going to pass it on to Faruhi to end our session today.
Fantastic. I first off wanted to thank all of our panelists for joining us tonight. This was a really fruitful conversation, and I think it gave trainees a much better idea of what to expect for this cycle. Thank you again also for putting your emails in the chat. For our audience, please make sure to write down those emails. I know I took a lot of notes tonight, and it was really helpful to have more insight into what to expect and some tips and tricks. I also put in the chat some of our information regarding Future Neos Now. If you wanted to look at our Instagram or email us with other future questions. And as well, like I mentioned, we are going to be recruiting for our next group, next executive council for the year. And we would love to hear your insight and views. So please look out for that. Thank you again, everyone. We hope you have a wonderful night and good luck on this application cycle.